All right. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon here on the US East Coast, and good day elsewhere. Thank you for attending today's webinar on using Plotly's Falcon database connector to create live dashboards. We'll be further examining Falcon database connector, recently released as an upgrade to our existing database connectors, and we'll sort of show how it plugs into the workflow of creating live dashboards, and in general, sort of linking your data to Plotly visualizations. So thank you everyone for attending, and let's get started. There will be a recording of this webinar available later. So if anyone wants to finish watching this at another time, just go to the main webinar page and you'll be able to access those. So I'll just start sharing my screen here and just show off some slides. Perfect. All right, so once again, thank you for joining us. Just a note that this is part of a monthly webinar series. So we will have another one on February 13th. You could view all upcoming webinars as they get posted at plot.ly/webinars. And we also have a series of workshops coming up in Montreal. We have a Dash Masterclass happening on February 17th through the 18th, and an R Shiny and Dash Dash R workshop on March 3rd and 4th. That'll be taking place also in Montreal. And that's just more information there. So just to kind of start with a brief introduction of Plotly. Plotly is multifaceted. So you could see the various ways of using Plotly here. At its core, it's an open source JavaScript library, usable any place that accepts JavaScript. And on top of that, we have Plotly APIs, which allow Plotly to be used from Python, R, Matlab, and various other data science environments, Julia, and a few other open source additions. And then there's the web-based Viz tool, which includes the Plotly workspace, Plotly dashboards, and Plotly presentations. And this is available both on Plotly Cloud, just simply hosted at plot.ly, and on-premise. So Plotly is available as an on-premise private instance behind your firewall, usually for security reasons. One more quick note just about webinar housekeeping. The webinars work best on Chrome. So if you are using another browser and are noticing some issues, it's worth trying it out on Chrome. And as I mentioned before, if you miss anything, recordings will be available. And just to quickly give a summary of what the data pipeline looks like when you're building data products powered by Plotly, we'll be focusing on the Falcon connector, but you're also able to use various APIs to push visualizations to Plotly. Plotly serves as a centralized hub where you're able to save your visualizations, share them, collaborate with your colleagues, and then on the consumption side, you're able to create dashboards, Plotly presentations, or just embed Plotly visualizations any place that accepts iframes. So here, this is just another another summary of different account options, be it Plotly Cloud or professional versions on Plotly Cloud. And then on top of this, there's also on-premise options. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to contact Rob Williams on our sales team. He's available at rob@plot.ly, or just visit support.plot.ly for support options. So with that, I'll just get into the main demo here. So the Falcon database connector is a desktop-based client that allows you to connect to various flavors of SQL, Spark, Apache, Impala, and several other databases and file systems. Right now, I'll just be using our test instance of PostgreSQL, but obviously, it's as easy as just selecting one of these other options to connect to other databases. This is a constantly expanding list. So if you don't see the particular database you're using on this list, at support.plot.ly, we have options to request features. So this would absolutely fall under that category. And as time goes on, this list will only grow. So there's a good chance that if you're not seeing it here, it will be here as time goes on. So in order to connect to your database, I just entered in our test credentials, but for any database, you would enter in the particular credentials, the host, port, etc., and the database that you're connecting to. And once you add all of that, then you just save those changes. And if you see it go gray like this, that means that you're successfully connected. Otherwise, you'll receive messages talking about what you need to do to fix your connection. And then you just follow the steps at the top here to play with your queries and eventually import your data into Plotly. So once I get into the query section, this is kind of a lightweight preview tool, which lets me create queries and preview those queries in a Plotly graph. Something like this doesn't have the full power of what you're able to do on Plotly. It's meant to be more of a preview to just kind of a sanity check to make sure that you have the right data. So the query that I'm working with is a fairly simple one. We're just getting alcohol consumption by country, but this is SQL, depending on which flavor it is. So your queries could be as simple or as complex as you want. So I'm just going to rerun this here. And this is a fairly straightforward data set, just 2 columns. So it's pretty apparent where what that preview would look like. But if you do have multiple columns, you're able to drag and drop them in a pivot style to come up with different preview types. So in particular, bar chart would probably be better to show this sort of data. So you could kind of choose that, see a preview of what that would look like. Once you're in the database connector, you have the option to export directly from here. So if you did want to just download the CSV, you'd be able to do that. But if you continue following these steps up here, this will allow you to connect your query to Plotly, which is really kind of the core of what makes a dashboard live. So within the database connector, you're able to just click on this link to query Postgres from plot.ly. And that brings us directly to the chart creator. So this is our standard import dialog. It's already all filled out for you. The URL that's assigned to you by your connector app, that's really the mechanics of what's maintaining this connection. And if I click connect, I'm able to get my SQL query here. And have all of this within the full chart editor. Just to kind of do a quick aside, this is the same import procedure that you would get just by entering the chart editor and clicking here. It's just easier to do it directly from the Falcon database connector. So once I have my query here, I could run it. Once again, I'll get the data. I'll get the data in a table showing up here, and now I have more options in terms of what I want my graph to look like. So if I do want, scatter plot, I would be able to absolutely do that. But I'm also able to get more complex visualization types. So we're looking at data by country. So this is a very this is data with a geographic component. So we could perhaps use some maps to look at this. In particular, we're looking at countries, so a choropleth could do quite nicely here. So similarly to before, where we're just picking our X and Y for a scatter plot, those are the mappings that make sense. Size, color, those are some other mappings that you'd be able to add. But here, what really matters is locations and values, and that's pretty much exactly what we have. And with a few tweaks, just making sure that I'm looking at country names, not country summaries or country abbreviations, I'm able to get the data in a format that maps out. So we could see clearly the geographic distribution of alcohol consumption. We could do other aesthetic changes. So we could enter in a title. We could change the style. So if perhaps we wanted a different color scale here, something that looks better in whatever style dashboard we're making. And once we do this, we could just save it, and then we'll be able to place it in a dashboard. So I could name this whatever I want. I could set my data to be public or private link. Just save it. And what this also allows me to do is schedule this query. So right now this is just a one-off, but if I tick this off, then I'm able to select how I want this data to update. So I could choose an interval anywhere from weekly to every minute. And obviously that interval would depend on the sort of data that you have what frequency it's changing. But pretty much within one click, you're able to set your schedule here. You're able to sync that with your connector, so your connector knows to continually make these updates. And once you do something like that, you have a live graph set up. So if I just save this again, I could go back to my files and begin working with this data. So the next step is the actual creation of your dashboard. And dashboards are created just using this menu here. So I could choose to create charts, data sets, database queries. This time I'm just going to create a dashboard. And this brings me to a blank screen or a blank dashboard rather, where I'm able to add various elements. So dashboards, you're able to add multiple elements. I could add various plots from my files. So I could look at that map that I just created. Also bring in one more graph here. I could change the layout. So if I want these side by side, I would be able to look at it in that way. If I want to change the styling of this, I would be able to do that. I could add other elements. So if I wanted to add a text box, I could do something like that. Markdown is supported here, so you could see a few options of what's available there. And similarly to the graphs themselves, these text boxes could be just dragged and dropped wherever you want them. And then lastly, if I wanted to play around with the styling of the dashboard itself, I'm able to do that just by hovering over here and going to my settings. So I could insert a logo if I have the URL of an image. I could change the colors of various elements, backgrounds, headers, etc. Change text fonts here. Change what I want my layout to be. So we do have a more traditional report style layout, which is available in addition to kind of your standard web dashboard. And lastly, add the addition of filters. So if graphs are coming from the same data set, cross-filtering is available, and using the search bar that just searches all the individual data sets. But we won't use those for this particular dashboard. Dashboards could be saved just like we saved our graph before. It could be made public, private, or private link, depending on what you want the security to be. And then once you've saved it, you're able to enter view mode. So entering view mode, this is really what a consumer of a dashboard would be seeing. So if you're creating a dashboard like this, you have access to the more styling and control of what the dashboard looks like. This is more meant for consumption. So what an end user would be looking at. So being able to interact with the graph, the data, etc. And this dashboard is live. So we set up the Falcon connector to update our data. As I mentioned in the original slides, there are multiple ways to set up this live link. So in addition to setting it up with the database connector, if I wanted to, I could just update it using Python. I'll just make a quick change in one of the graphs, just changing the bar color, but you could imagine this really represents new data coming in. This particular graph that I ended up grabbing, it's actually 311 complaints from New York. So that's absolutely changing on a daily basis. So you can imagine it's simply scraping that data as new data is updated. And when you go back to the dashboard, you'll see that changes made either from the dashboard or either from the Falcon connector itself, if new data shows up there, or via API. So you can see here, this is now coming up as orange instead of blue that we had it before. Those changes will be reflected in the dashboard itself. So Plotly dashboards are really meant to serve as kind of a live repository for your graphs. You're able to continually update your dashboard, and as a consumer of this data, you could imagine this serves as a replacement to receiving an Excel file, receiving a PowerPoint deck on a regular basis. They know that they could just go to a URL, and they're always going to be getting the most recent data. So in terms of creating live dashboards, that's really the power of kind of creating these live links. So with that, and then just one more thing to mention, we kind of just made this in a couple of minutes. We didn't really fine tune any of the styling. But if you do spend some time with it, you are able to create some pretty compelling dashboards. So this was actually created by a member of the Plotly community, looking at Twitter data and Brexit, sort of doing a remain versus leave sentiment analysis. This is really borrowing heavily from kind of an infographic style, and using what we just went through today. Something like this could be made live. So if there's something that that you're monitoring on a regular basis, you'd be able to create something of this caliber live. So with that, let me just shut off this sharing here, and we'll just get to some questions and answers. Oh. All right, so I'm just going through the chat here. So I'll see what sort of questions we have. And if you have any other questions, just use the Ask a Question module, or just feel free to enter it in the chat. So we had some issues there with not seeing on screen. So in terms of hierarchical data visualization, we do have Sankey diagrams. And so Sankey diagrams, that's a plot type. You do have the ability to create tree diagrams as well, but those are more an extension of kind of scatter plots, so points and lines being designed as a tree diagram. With proper styling, it could work. It could be very compelling, but Sankey is kind of is an official plot type there. And in terms of the background map of the world, it's not customizable at the moment. At the end of the webinar, I'll post a link to a modern, we have a blog post going through sort of more custom choroplots. So if you have a shapefile with counties or other sub-geographies that aren't just standard countries or states, then that goes through how to create those. But for kind of turnkey choroplots, that's more meant for countries and states. So there was a question about how frequently you could update the data pool. It could be anywhere from every minute to every week. So the most granular you could get is every minute. In terms of Plotly on-premise, I didn't really cover this that much, but Plotly on-premise is mainly meant to solve security issues that a lot of enterprise clients have. In terms of the features available in Plotly on-premise, it's mainly the sort of standalone server. There's also Dash app hosting, which I didn't really get into with this webinar, but there are other webinars that go more into Dash, as well as no limits in terms of API calls, or because this is all sitting on on your own server, so all of those limits are lifted in terms of API calls. And then there was a question of, are there performance numbers to understand the data pull from database? Not at the moment. And if you could send an email to either rob@plot.ly or go to our support site, we could kind of talk more in depth about what kind of performance indicators specifically you're looking for. And I'm just going to go into the question and answer section here. In terms of static reports sent by emails, that's not available just turnkey. Really, it's meant to essentially update a dashboard, and that dashboard lives at a URL. So whoever is viewing this would be looking at that URL. We do have examples of Plotly. Plotly is at its core just these JavaScript objects. So they definitely can be integrated into automated email reporting. And we do have a help page that goes through how to set something like that up in Python. So I'll also post that in the chat at the end once I'm done with these questions. And then Sankey, I answered that. In terms of the data pull, I answered that as well. I think, is there, in terms of the query tab on Falcon, there absolutely are. So this question is if there are any, where'd it go? I lost it. It was about features of the query tab on Falcon, and are there any features there that aren't available in Plotly? The Plotly chart creator is definitely more robust than what you have in the Falcon connector. It's a slightly different styling, like with dragging of the columns rather than sort of picking them with drop downs. But aside from that, there's no, there aren't any features that are in Falcon that aren't in the chart creator. So really, Falcon is meant to be a sort of chart preview tool. And then in terms of creating either live updating graphs or more robust charting options, like styling traces, etc., that would be done through plot.ly, the chart creator there. And I believe that's it. So let me just quickly look up these links. I'll post them in the, I'll post them here. So here's the link for email reports. And then we also have the Modern Data, Modern Data is our blog. This one's available in R, but this is also done in Python as well. So anything that's utilizing the Plotly API. All right. So thank you, everyone, for attending, and hope to see you guys at future webinars. Thanks a lot. Bye.